Imagine for a moment that your body has a kind of library of its own. Not a library of books, but a library of biological memories, records of every illness you have overcome, every vaccine you have received, every pathogen your immune system has learned to recognize. This library exists, and it is housed in a place you might not expect. For years, researchers have studied why some people seem to maintain strong defenses against illness well into their later years, while others become more vulnerable. The answer, it turns out, has less to do with luck than with something far more interesting: the quiet, ongoing conversation between your bones, your muscles, and the very cells that stand guard over your health. And like any library, this one requires the right conditions to preserve its collection. What those conditions are, and how small daily choices shape them, is a story that is only now coming into focus. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The architecture of a long life, how small daily choices shape the decades ahead. There is a question that lingers in the quiet moments. Perhaps when you are sitting with a morning cup of tea or walking alone on a familiar path. It is not a question of urgency or alarm, but one of gentle curiosity. What will the coming decades look like? And what role do I play in shaping them? For much of human history, this question was answered by circumstance. Genetics, geography, and luck determined the length and quality of a life. But something has shifted in our understanding. Researchers who study the oldest and healthiest populations have begun to notice patterns, not just in the genes people carry, but in the way they live. It turns out that the architecture of a long life is not built in a day, nor is it the result of any single dramatic intervention. It is built slowly, steadily, through 1,000 small choices, many of which are entirely within reach. This is not a conversation about turning back the clock or defying nature. It is a conversation about alignment, about bringing our daily habits into harmony with the biological systems that have supported human life for thousands of generations. When we understand how those systems work and what they require, the path forward becomes clearer. Not easier, perhaps, but clearer. Let us begin by considering the body not as a machine that wears out, but as a living landscape. In any landscape, certain conditions allow things to flourish. Soil must be fertile. Water must flow. There must be light and shade in the right proportions. The body is no different. It has its own soil, its own waterways, its own rhythms of light and darkness. And just as a garden left untended will eventually be overtaken by whatever happens to blow in on the wind, a body left untended will drift toward whatever conditions surround it. The difference is that we are not passive gardeners. We have more influence than we often realize. Part 1. The landscape within. To understand what a long and healthy life requires, it helps to understand a little about how the body changes over time. Not in a way that requires a medical degree, but in the way one might learn the contours of a familiar piece of land. Every human body is composed of trillions of cells, each one carrying out thousands of chemical reactions every second. These cells form tissues. The tissues form organs. And the organs form systems that all must communicate with one another. For most of life, this communication happens smoothly. The heart beats. The lungs draw air. The immune system patrols for threats. And the brain coordinates it all without any conscious effort. But over decades, small inefficiencies begin to accumulate. The signals between cells may become slightly slower or less clear. The quality control systems that identify and repair damaged components may begin to miss things they once caught. The reserves of various nutrients and cellular building blocks may gradually decline. None of this happens overnight, and none of it is necessarily a problem in itself. The human body was designed with considerable redundancy, backup systems for its backup systems. But as the years pass, The margin for error narrows. This is where lifestyle enters the picture. The way we eat, move, rest, and engage with the world either supports these underlying systems or adds another layer of strain. A body that is well nourished, appropriately challenged, and allowed adequate rest has a much wider margin. A body that is constantly inflamed, poorly fueled, or deprived of sleep operates closer to the edge. What researchers have observed in populations that age well is not that they avoid all stress or live in a state of perpetual ease. Quite the opposite. They experience the same challenges and losses as anyone else. What distinguishes them is a kind of physiological resilience, the ability to absorb stress, recover from it, and continue functioning. And that resilience, it turns out, can be cultivated. Part 2. The unseen work of maintenance. Much of what happens in the body happens beneath the level of awareness. We do not feel our cells repairing themselves or our immune system cataloging past infections. We do not sense the slow process of bone remodeling or the constant turnover of the cells that line our digestive tract. Yet these invisible processes are the very foundation of health. Consider for a moment the immune system. It is not a single thing, but a network of cells, tissues, and organs spread throughout the body. Its job is to distinguish friend from foe, to recognize what belongs and what does not. This is an extraordinarily complex task, requiring constant communication and precise coordination. One of the more fascinating discoveries in recent decades involves a particular type of immune cell known as a long-lived plasma cell. These cells are produced after the body encounters a new threat, such as a virus. In the immediate aftermath of that encounter, the body produces a surge of short-lived cells that pump out large quantities of antibodies to help clear the infection. But once the immediate danger has passed, a small number of these cells undergo a transformation. They migrate to specialized niches within the bone marrow, where they can persist for decades, releasing a slow, steady stream of antibodies the entire time. Think of them as librarians. They do not rush about responding to every new disturbance. Instead, they quietly maintain the archives, ensuring that if the same threat ever appears again, the body can respond more quickly and effectively. This is the biological basis of long-term immunity, not a constant state of high alert, but a quiet, durable record-keeping system. The bone marrow, where these cells take up residence, is not merely a passive storage depot. It is a dynamic environment, sensitive to the overall condition of the body. Factors that affect bone health, nutrition, physical activity, inflammation also affect the quality of this niche. A body that is sedentary, poorly nourished, and carrying excess inflammatory load may provide a less hospitable environment for these long-lived cells. The library, in other words, may not be as well maintained. This is one example of a recurring principle in the study of aging. The systems of the body are deeply interconnected. What supports one system tends to support others. What degrades one system tends to degrade others. There is no such thing as an isolated intervention. Every choice sends ripples through the entire landscape. Part 3. Movement as a signal. Of all the factors that influence how we age, physical movement may be the most powerful and the most underappreciated. It is not simply about burning calories or building muscle, though those are part of it. Movement is a form of communication, a signal that travels through every system of the body, telling cells that they are needed, that they should maintain their capacity, that they should not slip into the idle, underused state that precedes decline. When a muscle contracts, it releases chemical messengers into the bloodstream. These messengers travel to the brain, where they support the growth of new neurons. They travel to the bones, where they stimulate the process of remodeling that keeps bone tissue dense and strong. they travel to the liver, where they influence how the body handles sugar and fat. They even travel to the immune system, helping to regulate the inflammatory response. This is why the relationship between muscle mass and longevity is so consistent across studies. People who maintain more muscle as they age tend to have better metabolic health, stronger bones, more stable glucose levels, and lower rates of chronic disease. Muscle is not just for lifting and carrying. It is a reservoir of physiological resilience. But the type of movement matters, and the way researchers think about this has evolved. It is not enough to simply log a certain number of steps or spend a certain number of minutes on a treadmill. The body responds to challenge. It needs to be asked to do things that are slightly difficult, slightly outside its comfort zone. This is the principle of progressive load, and it applies whether one is lifting weights, climbing stairs, or practicing balance on an uneven surface. In traditional societies where people remain active into old age, there is no concept of exercise as a separate activity. Movement is woven into the fabric of daily life. People walk to fetch water, squat to tend gardens, carry bundles of firewood, and rise from the ground many times a day. These movements are not performed for the sake of fitness, but they maintain fitness nonetheless. The body receives a constant stream of signals that it must remain capable. For those living in more sedentary environments, recreating this pattern requires intention. It means choosing stairs over elevators, parking farther from entrances, standing while talking on the phone, and finding reasons to move throughout the day rather than sitting for hours at a stretch. It also means including activities that challenge strength, balance, and flexibility, not because one wants to become an athlete, but because these capacities are essential for maintaining independence. A fall in old age is not simply a fall. It is often the beginning of a cascade. A person who falls and breaks a hip may lose confidence, move less, lose muscle, become more isolated, and never fully recover. The best way to prevent this cascade is to build the strength and balance that make falls less likely in the first place. This is not about fear. It is about foresight. Part 4. The fuel we choose. If movement is the signal, food is the raw material. Every cell in the body is built from the nutrients we provide. Every chemical reaction depends on vitamins and minerals that must come from outside. The quality of the fuel determines the quality of the maintenance. This is not a conversation about restriction or deprivation. It is a conversation about adequacy. Many people in their 50s and beyond are not overfed in the nutritional sense, even if they consume more calories than they need. They may be undernourished in specific nutrients that are critical for long-term health. Consider vitamin D, which is actually a hormone precursor rather than a vitamin in the strict sense. It is produced in the skin in response to sunlight, and it plays a role in calcium absorption, immune regulation, and muscle function. As people age, the skin becomes less efficient at producing vitamin D. At the same time, many people spend more time indoors and use sunscreen more diligently when they go out. The result is that low vitamin D levels are extremely common in older populations, and this has consequences for bone health, immune function, and even mood. Vitamin A is another nutrient that deserves more attention than it typically receives. It exists in two forms. Preformed vitamin A, found in animal foods like liver and eggs, and provitamin A carotenoids, found in colorful plant foods. The body must convert carotenoids into the active form of vitamin A, and this conversion becomes less efficient with age and in the presence of certain health conditions. For this reason, older adults may need to be more intentional about including sources of preformed vitamin A in their diets. Then there is protein. The recommendation for protein intake does not decrease with age. If anything, it increases. Older bodies need more protein to maintain muscle mass and support immune function. Yet many older adults eat less protein than they did in their younger years, often because of changes in appetite, dental issues, or simply habit. Spreading protein intake across the day, including a serving at each meal, appears to be more effective for muscle maintenance than consuming most of it at a single meal. The broader pattern that emerges from studying healthy aging populations is not a single magic food or nutrient. It is a dietary pattern built around whole, minimally processed foods, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and animal foods used in moderate amounts. These foods provide not just the nutrients we understand, but thousands of other compounds whose roles we are only beginning to appreciate. There is also the question of when we eat. Research on circadian biology has shown that the body's ability to handle food varies throughout the day. Glucose tolerance, the efficiency with which the body processes carbohydrates, is generally higher in the morning and lower in the evening. Eating late at night, close to bedtime, disrupts sleep and places metabolic stress on the body. Simply shifting more food to earlier in the day and allowing a longer overnight fast is associated with better metabolic health in many studies. None of this requires extreme measures. It does not require counting every gram or eliminating entire food groups. It requires attention, a willingness to consider not just what is eaten, but how it fits into the broader pattern of living. Part 5. The delicate balance of inflammation. Inflammation has become a familiar word, but its meaning is often misunderstood. Acute inflammation is the body's essential response to injury or infection. When you cut your finger, the area becomes red, warm, and swollen. This is inflammation at work, delivering immune cells and repair factors to the site of damage. Without it, wounds would never heal. Chronic inflammation is different. It is a low-grade, persistent activation of the immune system in the absence of a clear threat. It does not produce the obvious signs of acute inflammation, but it quietly damages tissues over time. It has been linked to virtually every age-related condition, from heart disease to cognitive decline to the loss of muscle and bone. What drives chronic inflammation is not always obvious. Sometimes it is excess body fat, particularly around the abdomen, which releases inflammatory signals. Sometimes it is poor gut health, allowing bacterial fragments to escape into the bloodstream and trigger an immune response. Sometimes it is chronic stress, which alters the balance of hormones that regulate inflammation. Sometimes it is simply the passage of time, as the immune system becomes slightly less discriminating and more prone to overreaction. The lifestyle factors that support overall health also tend to keep inflammation in check. Regular physical activity reduces inflammatory markers. A diet rich in vegetables, fruits, and omega-3 fatty acids from fish or flax provides compounds that help resolve inflammation. Adequate sleep allows the body to complete its housekeeping processes. Strong social connections buffer against the physiological effects of stress. But there is another aspect of inflammation that is often overlooked: its relationship with the gut. The digestive tract is home to trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, that collectively form the gut microbiome. These organisms play a crucial role in educating the immune system, helping it learn to distinguish friend from foe. When the microbiome is diverse and balanced, the immune system tends to be well-regulated. When it is depleted, often by a lack of dietary fiber or by frequent antibiotic use, the immune system may become more prone to inappropriate activation. Supporting the microbiome means feeding it. The bacteria in the gut thrive on fiber, the parts of plants that humans cannot digest. When we eat fiber, it passes through the small intestine to the colon, where bacteria ferment it into short-chain fatty acids. These compounds nourish the cells lining the colon, help regulate inflammation throughout the body, and even influence brain function through the gut-brain axis. Fermented foods offer another avenue for supporting the gut. Foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, and kombucha contain live microorganisms that can contribute to the diversity of the gut community. In traditional cultures around the world, fermented foods appear in the diet in one form or another, not because people understood the science, but because they learned through generations what kept them healthy. The gut, like the bone marrow, is a site where immune cells reside and where immune memory is maintained. A healthy gut environment supports a balanced immune system. An unhealthy gut environment creates a constant, low-grade drain on immune resources, potentially diverting attention away from other tasks like maintaining long-term immune memory. This is yet another example of the interconnectedness that runs through every aspect of health. Part 6. The rhythm of rest and activity. There is a tendency to think of sleep as simply the absence of waking, a period of nothingness that interrupts the real business of living. But sleep is not nothing. It is an active, dynamic state in which the body performs essential functions that cannot be accomplished during the day. During deep sleep, the brain clears out metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. It consolidates memories, transferring information from short-term storage to long-term storage. The immune system releases proteins that help fight infection. Growth hormone is secreted, supporting tissue repair and muscle maintenance. The cardiovascular system slows down, allowing blood pressure to drop and the heart to rest. When sleep is insufficient or poor quality, all of these processes are compromised. The effects are not always immediate, but they accumulate. After a single night of poor sleep, glucose metabolism is less efficient. After several nights, inflammatory markers begin to rise. Over months and years, chronic sleep deprivation increases the risk of virtually every age-related condition. The challenge is that sleep becomes more fragile with age. The deep, restorative stages of sleep may become shorter. Nighttime awakenings become more common. The circadian rhythms that govern the sleep-wake cycle may shift, leading to earlier bedtimes and earlier rising. None of this is inevitable decline, but it does mean that sleep requires more attention than it once did. The principles of good sleep are simple, though not always easy to follow. Consistency matters more than almost anything else, going to bed and waking at roughly the same times. Even on weekends, light exposure matters, particularly in the morning, which helps anchor the circadian rhythm. Darkness matters at night, as even small amounts of light can suppress the production of melatonin, the hormone that signals the body to prepare for sleep. Temperature matters, as the body needs to cool slightly to initiate sleep. The mind matters, which is why activities that promote relaxation in the evening, reading, gentle stretching, conversation, can be more helpful than stimulating ones. Daytime activity also influences sleep. People who are physically active during the day tend to sleep more deeply at night. People who spend their days in sedentary isolation may not accumulate enough sleep pressure to drive robust sleep. The relationship between daytime and nighttime is bidirectional, each reinforcing the other. Rest is not limited to sleep. Periods of wakeful rest throughout the day, moments when the mind is not focused on a task, when the nervous system is not in a state of alert, also matter. These moments allow the body to shift from sympathetic dominance, the fight or flight mode, toward parasympathetic activity, the rest and digest mode. In a world that constantly demands attention and responsiveness, carving out space for genuine rest is an act of resistance against the chronic stress that erodes health over time. Part 7. The social self. There is a tendency in modern health conversations to focus on the individual, what one person eats, how one person moves, how one person sleeps. But humans are not solitary creatures. We evolved in groups, and our physiology reflects this. The presence of others, or the lack of it, has measurable effects on health. The data on social connection is striking. People with strong social ties live longer than those who are isolated. They have lower rates of heart disease, slower cognitive decline, and better immune function. The effect size is comparable to well-established risk factors like smoking and physical inactivity. This is not sentimentality. It is biology. Social connection influences the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. Positive interactions trigger the release of oxytocin, which has calming effects. They dampen the stress response, reducing the output of cortisol. They provide a buffer against the physiological wear and tear that accumulates over a lifetime of challenges. Loneliness, by contrast, is a stressor. It activates the same neural pathways as physical threat. The body responds to perceived social isolation by staying in a state of low-grade alert, which over time contributes to inflammation and metabolic dysregulation. This is not a matter of personality or preference. It is a fundamental feature of human biology. For those in the second half of life, maintaining social connections requires intentionality. Work may no longer provide daily contact with colleagues. Children may have moved away. Friends may have relocated or passed on. The natural networks that once provided social interaction may have thinned. Building new connections through shared activities, volunteer work, community groups, or simply reaching out to neighbors becomes an important investment in long-term health. The quality of connections matters as much as the quantity. Relationships characterized by trust, mutual support, and genuine affection provide the greatest benefits. Relationships characterized by conflict and strain may do more harm than good. This is another area where attention and discernment are valuable, not withdrawing from others, but cultivating the connections that nourish and releasing those that deplete. Part 8. The sense of purpose. Beyond social connection, there is something else that appears in the lives of those who age well. It is harder to measure than physical activity or nutrient intake, but researchers have found ways to study it. They call it purpose, a sense that one's life has meaning, that one has a reason to get up in the morning, that one's existence matters to someone or something. People who report a strong sense of purpose live longer. They have lower rates of cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline. They maintain physical function longer. They recover more quickly from setbacks. The mechanisms are not fully understood, but plausible pathways exist. Purpose may influence behavior. People with something to live for may take better care of themselves. It may influence the stress response, providing a psychological buffer against challenges. It may influence inflammation and immune function through pathways that are not yet mapped. Whatever the mechanism, the pattern is consistent across many studies. Purpose does not have to be grand. It does not require saving the world or achieving public recognition. For some, it is caring for grandchildren. For others, it is tending a garden, volunteering at a local organization, creating art, or simply being present for a friend in need. What matters is the sense that one's actions have meaning, that one is part of something larger than oneself. In traditional societies, purpose was often built into the structure of life. Elders had roles: teaching, advising, passing on knowledge, caring for the young. These roles provided not just social connection, but a sense of continued contribution. In modern societies, where age segregation is common and the wisdom of elders is not always sought, purpose may require more active cultivation. This is not about staying busy for the sake of busyness. It is about engagement, finding activities that absorb attention, that feel worthwhile, that connect the individual to something beyond their own concerns. The research suggests that this engagement, whatever form it takes, is as important for healthy aging as any physical practice. Part 9. Environment and exposure. The body does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in constant interaction with the surrounding environment, the air, the water, the light, the sounds, the substances that touch the skin and enter the lungs and pass through the digestive tract. Attention to environment is a recurring theme in the study of healthy aging. Not in a fearful way, but in an informed way. The goal is not to create a sterile bubble, which is impossible and probably counterproductive. The goal is to reduce unnecessary burdens on the body's systems. Air quality matters more than most people realize. Fine particulate matter, small enough to penetrate deep into the lungs and enter the bloodstream, has been linked to inflammation, cardiovascular disease, and cognitive decline. For those living in areas with significant air pollution, simple measures like using high-quality air filters indoors can reduce exposure. Water quality matters. Contaminants in drinking water, heavy metals, industrial chemicals, agricultural runoff, add to the body's detoxification burden. Knowing what is in the local water supply and using appropriate filtration if needed is a reasonable precaution. Light exposure matters, both in quantity and timing. Bright light during the day, particularly in the morning, helps anchor circadian rhythms and supports mood, sleep, and metabolic health. Darkness at night supports melatonin production and sleep quality. The widespread use of artificial light, particularly the blue light from screens in the evening, disrupts these ancient rhythms. Simple adjustments, dimming lights in the evening, using blue-blocking glasses, avoiding screens before bed, can help restore the natural pattern. Noise matters. Chronic exposure to noise, even at levels that do not seem loud enough to be harmful, activates the stress response and has been linked to cardiovascular disease. Creating periods of quiet in daily life, seeking out natural soundscapes, and reducing unnecessary background noise are all supportive practices. None of this requires paranoia or radical lifestyle changes. It requires awareness, a recognition that the body is always in dialogue with its surroundings, and that small adjustments to those surroundings can make a meaningful difference over time. Part 10. The integration. The themes that run through this exploration: movement, nutrition, rest, connection, purpose, environment, are not separate. They are woven together. Each influences the others. Each either supports or undermines the rest. A person who moves well sleeps better. A person who sleeps well has more energy for movement and social engagement. A person who eats well has better glucose regulation, which supports brain function and mood. A person with strong social connections has lower inflammation, which supports muscle and bone. A person with a sense of purpose is more likely to maintain all the other practices, because they have a reason to do so. This integration is why isolated interventions so often fail. Taking a supplement cannot compensate for poor sleep. Exercising for an hour cannot compensate for sitting for the other 15 waking hours. Eating a perfect diet cannot compensate for chronic loneliness. The body does not respond to single inputs. It responds to the overall pattern. For those in the second half of life, this is both a challenge and a relief. The challenge is that there is no single magic bullet, no pill, no protocol, no secret that will bypass the need for consistent attention. The relief is that small improvements in multiple areas add up. One does not need to be perfect in any single domain. One simply needs to be moving in the right direction across several. A person who adds a 10-minute walk to their day, shifts their evening meal an hour earlier, and reaches out to an old friend once a week has made 3 modest changes. Over a decade, Those modest changes accumulate into something substantial. The body does not demand dramatic transformation. It responds to consistency. Part 11. The long view. There is a tendency in modern culture to think in terms of quick results. A diet that promises transformation in a month. An exercise program that guarantees results in 6 weeks. A supplement that claims to reverse the effects of aging. This mindset is understandable. Life is short. And the desire for improvement is natural, but it is not aligned with how human biology actually works. The body operates on longer timescales. The cells lining the digestive tract turn over every few days. But the collagen in bone turns over years. The memories that shape personality are built over decades. The relationships that provide support are cultivated over a lifetime. Health is not a destination to be reached. It is a process to be maintained. This is where the study of healthy, aging populations offers a different perspective. The people who live longest and best are not those who followed a particular diet or adhered to a specific exercise regimen. They are those who, over many years, maintained patterns of living that supported their biology. They moved regularly, ate whole foods, rested adequately, stayed connected to others, and remained engaged with life. They did not do any of this perfectly. They simply did it consistently. For those in their 50s and beyond, the question is not how to reverse the aging process. It is how to participate in it consciously, how to provide the body with what it needs to continue its work of maintenance and repair, how to remove unnecessary obstacles, how to cultivate the conditions that allow health to persist. This is not a passive process. It requires attention, intention, and effort. But it is not a battle against nature. It is a collaboration with nature, an acknowledgement of how the body works, and a willingness to work with it rather than against it. The years ahead are not simply a period of decline to be managed. They are an opportunity to live in a way that is informed by understanding, grounded in daily practice, and open to what each day brings. The architecture of a long life is built slowly, but it is built. And the work of building it, like any meaningful work, carries its own rewards along the way. There is a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the small choices made today are connected to the health experienced years from now. Not in a direct, guaranteed way. Biology is never that simple, but in the way that tending a garden is connected to the harvest. The gardener does not control the weather or the soil or the countless variables that determine what will grow. But the gardener who prepares the ground, plants at the right time, waters during dry spells, and removes what competes with the crop has done what can be done. The rest is in other hands. The same is true for the body. There is much that cannot be controlled. Genes play a role. Luck plays a role. The accumulation of circumstances over a lifetime plays a role. But there is also much that can be influenced, not by force, but by attention, by showing up, day after day, and making choices that align with how the body actually works. This is not a prescription. It is an invitation. An invitation to consider the patterns of daily life, to notice where small adjustments might be possible, to approach the coming years with curiosity rather than fear. The body has remarkable capacities for maintenance and repair, given the right conditions. The question is not whether those capacities exist. They do. The question is whether we are providing the conditions that allow them to operate. The answer to that question is written not in grand declarations or dramatic transformations, but in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days, in how we move, what we eat, when we rest, who we love, and why we rise each morning. That is where the architecture of a long life is built. One choice at a time, one day at a time, over all the days that remain. The body's library is not a metaphor. It is a living reality, a collection of cells and memories housed within the architecture of your bones. sustained by the choices you make each day. The question is not whether your body is capable of building this archive. It is. The question is whether you are providing the conditions it needs to preserve what matters most. That is the quiet work of healthy aging. Not dramatic transformation, but daily attention. Not perfection, but persistence. If this conversation has sparked a thought or stirred a question, we would welcome your reflections in the comments. And if you would like to continue exploring the archive, there are other videos waiting in the library. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.